In the autumn of 2007, a shocking murder rocked New York's Fifth Avenue and captured headlines across the country. Linda Stein had become known as the realtor to the stars after decades of selling Manhattan properties to some of the world's wealthiest and well-known celebrities. The boisterous former rock music manager and icon in her own right was found murdered in the living room of her $3 million penthouse. Had the brash, loud, and occasionally abrasive professional finally crossed paths with someone who had enough of her larger-than-life personality? Maybe Linda pissed off the wrong person. Hi everyone, I'm Kevin and welcome to Just Thought Lounge. Here at JTL, we deliver serious, well-balanced coverage of the cases that really make you think. If that sounds like your type of true crime, then you've come to the right place. The case we're about to look at may seem straightforward on the surface, but there may be much more to this story than meets the eye, or the camera's lens. Let's take a look. By all accounts, Linda Stein was a force of nature. Loud, witty, and harsh in her use of language, Linda was a successful and wealthy real estate agent based in Manhattan. She ran in the kind of social circles that many only dreamed of. In her younger years, Linda was known as a fixture at CBGB, the Mud Club, and Studio 54. She counted Sir Elton John and Whoopi Goldberg amongst her closest friends. Linda's ascent to the celebrity class began in the 1970s when she met her future husband, Seymour Stein. Seymour, already establishing himself in the music industry, was to become the president of Sire Records, which he founded, and vice president of Warner Brothers Records. Linda quickly left her teaching position in favor of a managing partnership with her husband, and she was about to see big things. After their founding in 1974, Linda co-managed the highly influential New York-based punk rock band, the Ramones. During their 8-year marriage, Linda and Seymour had 2 daughters, Samantha and Mandy. They remained close friends following their divorce in the early 1980s. This is also when Linda began to transition her managing role into a lucrative career in real estate. Leveraging her many celebrity connections, as well as her unique charisma, Linda sold multi-million-dollar homes in New York to clients like Madonna, Bruce Willis, Angelina Jolie, and Steven Spielberg. Linda Stein's life was not just about schmoozing with the stars and high commissions. She battled breast cancer for years, resulting in 2 mastectomies. A fan of self-medicating, Linda developed an affection for marijuana, as well as an unrelated and unfortunate addiction to alcohol. In 2007, Linda had fought back against the cancer and had done so optimistically. But at the age of 62, she was facing a new enemy. Doctors had discovered a benign tumor on her brain. Although it was non-cancerous and did not require surgery, the tumor was making an impact on Linda and her life. She was taking a series of mood stabilizers, designed to mellow her out from sudden outbursts and mean behavior caused by the tumor's placement. Acquaintances were sadly not shocked when they heard the news that someone had bludgeoned the New York icon to death. Some thought Linda had finally pissed off the wrong person.
She was a little bit kooky, but she was a lot of fun, and we all loved her, and I think everybody in the industry felt that way.
For me, it's just frightening. And, I mean, she probably had a bunch of enemies because she was tough. But murder, it's a different ballgame.
Mandy, who lived full-time in Los Angeles, had been staying with her mother in New York for a short visit in late October 2007. When she returned to her mother's home, a penthouse on Fifth Avenue, at roughly 10:30 p.m. on the 30th, Mandy encountered a devastating scene. Her mother on the floor of the living room, not moving. She rapidly dialed 911 on both the landline and her cell phone. She also called out for help in the building. Mandy needed to hand off the phone partway through the call as she lost her composure over the scene.
Police operator 1142 at emergency. Hello?
I just called. Please, I need an ambulance.
Okay, what happened then, ma'am?
My mom, she's dead, I think. I don't know.
Hello? What happened?
I came home and my mom is in a puddle of blood. Can you just send somebody?
Yes,
right
ma'am,
now?
I sure can. Miss.
Hello?
Yeah, patient breathing and awake?
Is this 911?
Yes, it is. It's for a male or a female?
For a female.
How old is the patient? Approximate. How old? Elderly, young?
60.
60. What's wrong, sir?
She's lying on the floor, a lot of blood from her head. The daughter just came in and found her like this.
She's bleeding heavily, sir. It's important.
She's bleeding heavily. She's not moving.
What happened? She felt she hurt herself?
I don't know.
Listen, mister, is she conscious, yes or no?
She's not conscious. She's not moving.
Big question now. Is she breathing? Is she breathing, sir?
She's not breathing.
She's not breathing.
I don't think so. I can't feel it.
If I give you...
She's lying face down.
Hello, mister? Okay, the ambulance is en route to that location.
She's 62.
Thank you, mister.
Linda was found in a pool of blood with the hood of her sweatshirt pulled over her head. When emergency responders arrived, they pulled back the hood. The state of the scene removed any doubts that Linda could have fallen and accidentally caused the injuries, or that they could have been self-inflicted. She had 5 lacerations on her head caused by a blunt metal object, according to the coroner, but she had been struck many more times, over 20. Linda was a petite woman, standing at 5'3" and only 132 pounds. Her years of cancer treatments and new medications had also left her weakened. The coroner assessed that she was likely unconscious by the time she fell to the ground. There were no bruises on her hands to indicate that she had fought back. The time of death was not exact. The attack had to have occurred hours before Mandy found her mother, but beyond that, it was determined to have occurred at some point earlier that same day. Investigators found no missing items or signs of forced entry. It seemed unlikely to be a stranger or a robbery gone wrong. An investigative reporter located a side door to the building that was unlocked and could have been used as the potential entry point to the apartment building. However, this unlikely lead was set aside in favor of a more direct one. There are surveillance cameras capturing the front entrance to Linda's building, as well as inside the penthouse. Investigators examining this footage began to piece together a timeline. And there was one individual with access to Linda in her home that day that stood out. 26-year-old Natavia Lowry had, just like Linda, grown up middle class in New York with dreams of rising in the ranks. After a short-lived stint at university, Natavia had worked at a PR firm briefly before signing with a temp agency. In 2007, this agency placed her in the demanding role of Linda Stein's personal assistant. In the few months that Natavia had held the role, she had experienced some ups and downs. Linda was not an easy woman to work for, a fact that was made obvious with the abrupt firing of her previous assistant, either due to a payment dispute or a personal affair that turned sour. Natavia had success in the role. Linda was said to have complimented her to others, but there was also reported awkwardness in her tasks. Natavia was expected to run personal errands, to accompany Linda in her daily walks in Central Park, and she needed to navigate Linda's mood swings. Natavia was captured entering the building just before noon at 11:56 a.m. on the 30th. At that time, she carried a single large manila envelope. She walked past renovation workers inside the unit and waited to gain access to Linda in the living room, which was unfortunately not covered under surveillance. The time spent with Linda is just over an hour. At 1:19 p.m., Natavia is shown exiting the building. The timing of Natavia's visit with Linda raised suspicions. When leaving, she carried 2 bags, a red one and a green one. Investigators examining the footage were struck by 2 observations. First, they determined that the red bag appeared laden, as though Natavia is carrying a heavy object from the building. The murder weapon, what was suspected to be a blunt metal object, was not recovered. Also curious was the state of Natavia's trousers. Her cargo-style bottoms have large pockets shown clearly on the camera as she enters at noon. But as Natavia leaves, she appears to be wearing the cargo pants inside out. If Natavia was responsible for Linda's injuries, was she attempting to conceal blood spatter on her clothing? Despite the messy scene, what the cameras do not capture is anything resembling blood on the young assistant. But was it possible that she sufficiently concealed any stains by turning her trousers inside out? The lack of blood visible on the key suspect, despite the significant spatter at the scene, was not the only potential inconsistency in the working theory. Linda's daughter Samantha initially told police that she last spoke with her mother at 2 p.m. on the day of her death, calling into question the timeline presented by the surveillance footage, which showed Natavia exiting the building well before that time at 1:19. In the hours after Natavia left, she continued to run the regular errands set out by Linda. She fielded calls from clients and Linda's family members, including a call from her ex-husband Seymour, and she had lunch with a friend. Before calling it a day, Natavia left a message for Linda.
Hey Linda, it's Natavia. Just want to let you know that I'm leaving work at 5:30. Hopefully the walk in the park was actually good. I left everything upstairs at the door, and Seymour called.
Natavia, just like others close to Linda, spoke with police immediately after the realtor was found murdered. But as more information came to light and the surveillance footage was analyzed, detectives were keen to question the assistant more intensely. And they got their chance days later when Natavia called the police to complain about reporters camped outside her front door. She was invited into the police department to speak further. Detective Antonio Rivera and his partner began questioning Natavia Lowry at a police station in Lower Manhattan. Natavia started by reiterating her innocent and straightforward version of the events, a workday as usual. But hours into the interview, the detectives began to apply pressure. They began to reveal what they knew about the young assistant and her criminal past. Depending on who in Natavia's life you spoke to, a very different picture emerged of the young professional. To family, she was amongst the kindest people one could possibly encounter. An ex-boyfriend told the press that Natavia wouldn't hurt a fly that landed on her. But some older friends disagreed. Natavia had allegedly used an old high school friend's identity to take out a phone contract and credit cards in their name and run up the balance. This old friend called Natavia a pathological liar. She reportedly skipped out on rent and was sued for the funds, though family said this was due to a roommate's error, not Natavia's. What NYPD detectives soon learned, however, was that the assistant had been taking some liberties with Linda Stein's accounts, and not to the tune of a few $100s as her old friend had claimed. Natavia had been making charges for her own use on Linda's credit cards. On the day of the murder, she withdrew $800 from one of Linda's accounts. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. Detectives believed they could trace nearly $30,000 stolen from Linda by Natavia during the brief 4-month period she worked for the realtor. Did Linda discover these transactions and confront her assistant on the afternoon of the 30th of October? The argument could have escalated, leading to the attack, or perhaps Natavia made a calculated move to murder her boss before she was reported for the theft. According to police, Natavia first told them that a masked man came into Linda's apartment while she was with Linda. This man was a stranger that Linda told her to let in. The strange man was wearing all black and had his face covered. Linda began screaming at the man until her assistant heard 7 thumps. The man told Natavia threateningly that he knew where she lived, so that probably explains the murder. Unconvinced, interrogators kept hammering away at what they dubbed Natavia's ninja story. But it is important to note that at this point, the interview was not recorded. That changed, however, when it seemed to detectives that a confession to the murder was forthcoming. After 12 hours in the interrogation room, Natavia began to speak about Linda's behavior towards her that afternoon. How the realtor was angry, cursing, and waving around what she called a yoga stick at her.
And she's just like yelling and screaming and cursing. And I'm looking like asking myself, who the heck, like, what the heck is going on? You know, I'm like, why am I here? Like, what's going on? How did I get to this point? You know, I'm asking myself that. And I'm like, looking at her like, okay, what's wrong with her? you know, because she just looks crazy right now. Her hand is, you know, going like that. And then she had like her, it's like a wooden baton type thing, you know.
Is it made of wood or some other material?
It's wood.
Okay. And what is it used for?
Yoga. Yoga, she goes for walks.
Okay, and can you describe it to me?
It's like, I don't know if you ever see people do yoga. They put it on their shoulders. They stretch. They turn. It looks like a king.
And how long is it about?
Probably like the length of a cane, but without that hook.
The hook?
So she's pointing the cane at me now, right? So I move the cane. You know how you just like slap it?
Where were you? Still on the couch?
Mm-hmm.
Natavia continued to explain how her boss had been constantly yelling at her and everyone else, how she had blown marijuana smoke in the assistant's face that afternoon and insulted her with a racial slur. This comment was the last straw for Natavia.
So I'm still on the couch. So she's like waving a cane and stuff at me. Then it's like, I don't know, like after that remark and stuff, and you know, her screaming and yelling, I just snatched it from her. So I took it and it's like, I just hit her with it.
Where about her body?
Like right here. But it's long, so, you know.
It was Linda's treatment of her assistant that caused her to snap. Natavia claimed to have blacked out and lost track of her own actions. She said the verbal abuse from Linda was unbearable, and she was repeatedly denied even a 10-minute break. Though she also insisted that their working relationship prior to that day had been a good one.
After the first time she fell, and then you continued to hit her on the head with the stick?
Yes.
Do you know how many times you hit her?
That wasn't myself. I can't count. It was just like, I was mad. I was confused. I was angry, paranoid. It was like a feeling like I never had before. It was like, it felt like she was like my worst enemy, you know? So it's like, how do you go from somebody, you know, like a best friend, you know, to an enemy, you know?
Natavia told her interrogators that Linda was routinely inappropriate and at times used racist language. This point would later be hotly contested by many people that knew Linda well.
I used to talk with her and just be like, you know, 'cause she used to always curse people out and stuff. Like, she didn't care. She would, you know, always say like little racial things. And I'll just be like, Linda, you can't do that, you know? And
did you feel insulted when she would say these racial things, even if they weren't about you?
Right, you know, and then I'll say sorry to the person, you know, and I'll just be like, I'm so sorry.
Natavia Lowry was formally arrested and charged for Linda Stein's murder. She pleaded not guilty and promptly recanted her confession. According to Natavia's aunt, Julia Caro, the police took her niece in the interrogation room and told her that her mother would be filling out a missing persons report if she didn't confess. They refused to let her call her mother or her lawyer. She claims the detectives lied and informed her that her lawyer had been contacted. She was kept in the room all night, and then when she came out, they said she'd confessed. Her defense attorneys argued that the statements were coerced. She just needed to make something up to get out of the room. Natavia's confession more or less aligned to the physical evidence already collected by NYPD detectives, in that Linda was struck in the head. The other details offered by Natavia's alleged confession are more ambiguous. It was odd that there was no physical evidence left on Natavia's clothing, and a thorough search of her home, which included pulling out the drains to test for DNA, returned absolutely nothing.
Did you check your clothes to make sure you didn't have any blood on you?
Nothing.
What did you do with the pants that you were wearing?
Still have them. I still, you know.
Have you washed the pants or the top?
The top, no. I think I took the pants and I think my mom washed it.
The murder weapon, the yoga stick, has never been found. Nonetheless, the case was becoming known in the media as the yoga stick murder. Although that name became ubiquitous, few people could actually describe what a yoga stick actually was. It could have been a Pilates bar, or maybe something used to correct posture, but it has not been made clear. According to Linda Stein's private yoga instructor, she had never heard of a yoga stick. She reported that Linda did not have any type of exercise stick or pole in her multi-million-dollar apartment, and that Linda's only pieces of exercise equipment were a few small dumbbells, which could hardly be confused with a stick or a pole. As Natavia's trial date approached, the NYPD were queried about the alleged murder weapon. Their reply was that they never said the yoga stick was the weapon. The spokesman stated, "We said she told detectives it was a yoga stick. She may well have used something else." The second area of contention were the nature of the insults Natavia claims were leveled at her by Linda, specifically the alleged racial comments. This assertion in particular did not sit well with friends and family, who strongly argued that the punk rock pioneer would simply not have spoken in this manner. It did seem possible, however, that her illness and medications could have impacted her behavior to this extreme. Furthermore, those close to Linda also believed that Natavia's assertion that her boss was blowing marijuana smoke into her face rang untrue. Friends said Linda was unfailingly discreet with her smoking habits. For instance, she would leave the room or open a window. And in this assertion, Linda's friends were vindicated. Results from the autopsy showed no trace of marijuana in her body. She could not have been blowing it at Natavia that afternoon. Additionally, the assistant's description of hitting her boss about 6 times over the head was conservative. Linda was struck far more than half a dozen times. If Natavia had been provoked into attacking her boss, it did not happen in the way Natavia had stated. At trial, Natavia also faced charges of theft for the months-long fraud she had been committing on her boss. To these charges, she had no real defense, and it certainly gave her a motive for the murder. To the murder charge, Natavia's new legal counsel, Ron Kuby, argued that the videotaped confession the police made is basically a hostage video in which she said the things the police needed her to say. He attempted to establish reasonable doubt by pointing to a financial motive held by Linda's daughter, Mandy. Mandy had a strained relationship with her mother, and according to defense assertions, she was also financially dependent upon her. Both daughters inherited what was described as a large fortune after Linda passed. Detective Rivera was pressured to explain why a construction worker in Linda's apartment that day was found with scratches on his hands but had not been considered as a suspect. The worker explained that he had hit his hand on the wall, an explanation that the detective believed was reasonable and therefore accepted. NYPD investigators found one individual with motive entered the room where Linda Stein was later found dead, and then that person later confessed. To this, Ron Kuby concluded by suggesting another point of doubt: the absence of the murder weapon and questions surrounding its use. A yoga stick could not have been the murder weapon, he argued, because there is no such thing as a yoga stick. Natavia Lowry was convicted of second-degree murder and 3 counts of grand larceny, as well as a series of others relating to the $30,000 in stolen funds from Linda. She received a sentence of 27 years to life. Natavia is currently an inmate at Bedford Hills Correctional Facility, a New York State prison. After the verdict, she reasserted her innocence. This case was turned into a media circus. It was never about evidence. Linda Stein was fondly remembered by her many friends, with both Sir Elton John and Madonna issuing statements of grief upon her death. Liz Rosenberg, vice president of Warner Brothers, where Linda's ex-husband once worked, also released a statement. Those who are lucky enough to know Linda will forever remember her as a force of nature with a huge passion for life, a wicked sense of humor, and an abiding love for music. Thanks for watching. I'm Kevin. This is Just Thought Lounge, and I'll see you in the next one.